Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be talking about why I don't believe in God anymore. Now, I grew up in Christianity. I was baptized as a Catholic. I went to Mass every Sunday. My family was very Catholic. I went to a Catholic school. And then when I was around 11, my family left the Catholic Church and we became Protestant, evangelical, and I became obsessed with the Bible and preaching and evangelism and winning lost souls for the Lord. And Christianity was everything to me. And then by the time I was a senior in high school, I decided that I wanted to go into ministry full time and become a pastor. And so I did that. I went into ministry. And the preaching, the teaching, the Bible studies, the evangelism all increased. And it just became my entire life. And then I went to college and I got a bachelor's degree in theology and ministry. And everything about that season of my life was all centered around believing. First and foremost, believing that God existed, that there was a God. And then secondly, believing that Jesus Christ was God. Jesus Christ was my Lord and Savior. Believing that Jesus Christ died and rose again and all the stuff. It was all centered around believing, something we had to believe in. And then as I would go out and evangelize, what was I trying to do? I was trying to get other people to believe in what I believed. And I considered myself and my group to be believers, and then anyone else who was outside of my group who didn't believe what we believed were considered to be unbelievers. And so the whole point of evangelism, of sharing the gospel, was to convert these unbelievers and to get them to believe. And once they believed, then they would become a believer. And when they became a believer, they were forgiven by God, they were accepted, they were saved, and they were able to spend eternity with Jesus in heaven. That's what we believed, and that was really the driving force behind sharing the gospel and preaching and teaching. It was to get as many lost souls saved, because these lost souls, these unbelievers, were going to hell if we did not convert them to our religion, to Christianity. And it was very convincing. And again, this was my entire life for many years. The focus was getting as many people saved as possible and getting them to believe what I believed. But when I was in college, I started to question and doubt a lot of these different doctrines that I was taught and that I was learning about. And for the first time, really, I started to practice critical thinking, and I started to think for myself, and I started to study so much of the different teachings and doctrines out for myself. I started to question really everything, because deep within my heart, there was this intuition. There was something that was off. There was something that I was sensing in this approach of believing and having one group, one in-group as the believers, and then everyone else being the out-group as the unbelievers. There was something about that just did not sit well with me. Especially the whole, if they didn't believe, then there was some divine punishment waiting for them. That whole idea, that whole approach just never resonated with me. And I followed that and I taught that because I was taught that I had to. And then I was taught that, of course, if I chose not to believe in these things, then I wouldn't be considered a Christian. And if I wasn't considered a Christian, then I would be a unbeliever. And if I was an unbeliever, then that meant that I was not in relationship with God, and that when I died, I would be going straight to hell for eternity to suffer consciously. So the last thing I was going to do was jeopardize my faith in what I believed in, and I just decided to go with it. But now, so at this time in my life, I'm in college, like I was saying, and I really started to think and contemplate about a lot of these doctrines, especially like hell and original sin and eschatology and many others. But one of the main things I started to really think about was what's this big deal about believing, especially believing in God? Either God is true, God is real, or God is not. But in believing in God, there's the potential that there is no God or that God doesn't exist because it's a belief, it's a hope, it's an expectation, but it's not a knowing. And so I started learning about some of the Christian mystics. And I started learning that really in every tradition, in Christianity, but just about every other tradition as well, there's two main paths. Okay, so you've got the fundamentalist path, which was the path of Christianity that I was brought up in and that I spent many years in. But then there's the path of mysticism. And so the Christian mystics, they have a completely different understanding or approach to God. For them, and this was what I was reading about this. I started reading some of the Christian mystics like Saint John of the Cross and Saint Teresa of Avila, Meister Eckhart, Julian of Norwich, and many others. And so I'm reading about their spirituality and their understanding of God. And the thing that really intrigued me about them was that they were talking about this direct path to God that was centered around going within. And this was brand new to me because growing up in the fundamentalist approach to God in Christianity, it was all about distance and separation. God was this deity, this being that was way up there in the heavens, in the sky somewhere, and I was down here on earth, and there was, again, just infinite separation. And when I would pray, when I would feel the presence of God, it was because God's presence was coming down from heaven. Or if I was praying, I was sending up prayers to the big man upstairs. That's how it worked. And hopefully, when I died, I would then get to spend eternity. I would then meet God face to face. But until then, there was distance, there was separation. But the Christian mystics were saying something completely different than that. They were saying that God, number one, is not this deity, this mega being in the sky, up in the heavens somewhere, but that God is infinite and omnipresent and within everyone and everything, within unbelievers and within believers, within every single human being. Everyone was included in the presence of God. All things were in God, and God was in all things. And this was very, very fascinating. This was very intriguing. And what they talked about, what they wrote about, was that if we go within, we can directly know God. We can have this experiential knowledge that immensely transcends any kind of belief in God. Because again, belief in God is the belief that there is a being, there is a deity that exists somewhere out there. And that's what so many people, so many Christians are trying to argue and prove to other people, the existence of a deity out there somewhere that's invisible, that's not here, that we can't really know for sure exists until we die and go to heaven someday. Okay, that's what so many people are trying to prove, and that's what so many debates are over, whether or not this deity, this God exists. But this is not what the Christian mystics are talking about. What they're saying is that God is something that can be experienced and known by anyone who goes within and has a mystical experience that transcends the finite analytical mind. Because when you go beyond the finite analytical thinking mind, you discover that whatever God is, first and foremost, cannot be understood conceptually with the mind, because God is infinite. And so how can a finite mind understand or fully grasp the infinite? It's impossible. And then secondly, if God is infinite, what does that mean? It means that God is limitless. There is no boundary that says this is God and this is not God. God is omnipresent, and there is nothing that is not God. We are all. So the depths of who we are, the deepest truth of our existence is fundamentally one with the existence of God. And for the Christian mystics, maybe not all the Christian mystics, but some of the Christian mystics, and then many of the mystics in the Eastern traditions, like in Hinduism, Buddhism, and Taoism, God, they don't even, in the East, they don't even say the word God, especially in Buddhism, because again, there are no words that can conceptualize what God is. It's something that has to be experienced. And in that experience, it's an experience that is completely transcending the finite mind. But for the mystics, God does not exist. God is existence itself. And so it's a completely different approach. And so I say all that to say I start learning about all of this. And even at that point, what I'm hearing, what I'm reading about from the mystics, it's still another theology. It's still another philosophy. It's still something to believe in. And for a while, I'm reading this. I liked it. It was intriguing. But it was just something else to believe in. Why? Because I didn't know it for sure. I didn't have any of these mystical experiences that the Christian mystics and the mystics of the East were having, so I still did not know. But then I said, you know what? I don't really know what to believe in anymore. I'm honestly tired of the whole believing thing that I've been programmed with for most of my life. I don't believe in any of these doctrines I was taught anymore, and I'm just questioning everything, and I don't know what to do. And I entered into a difficult time because I was confused, I was scared, I felt like I had lost a part of myself, because when you grow up in a religion, in a tradition that is so centered and focused on their belief system, and there's so much that is connected to that belief system, like the afterlife, like going to hell, and these doctrines of like original sin, like you are inherently sinful until you believe, then you can be forgiven and spiritually regenerated, and you can become holy and righteous. Like there's so much about identity that is dependent on these different beliefs. And so as I let go of all these beliefs that I had growing up, again, I felt like I was losing a part of myself. So I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what was true. I didn't know what to believe in. And even though I was spending time studying the Christian mystics and reading so many of their writings, and then spending lots of time studying the Eastern traditions and in Buddhism and Hinduism and Taoism, it still wasn't something that I could say I know. It was still a belief. It was still theology. It was still spiritual teachings, spiritual ideas, philosophies. And yeah, it was great because it was giving me some hope that there were other people in this world that had apparently experienced God, and they knew God. There was a deep inner knowing, and it was transcending the old way of just believing and expecting and hoping that there's a deity out there somewhere. So that was encouraging. That gave me confidence, but still, I didn't have the experience for myself. But then everything changed for me when I put down the books and I put down the different teachings, and I stopped listening to so many different lectures and philosophers and spiritual teachers and gurus, and I started practicing meditation and contemplative prayer. And when I did that, and first I had to learn about meditation because I had so many misconceptions, and misunderstandings about it, especially growing up in Christian fundamentalism. I was taught that meditation was something that was dangerous and demonic, and so I really avoided it. But I spent some time, probably about a year, or maybe a year and a half, I spent studying meditation from the Eastern point of view, learning about it, and then I started practicing it. And when I started practicing it, meditation became my method to transcend the mind and to experience this divine presence within the depths of my being. And it took some time, but eventually it happened. And when I experienced that for myself, when I had my first mystical experience of experiencing God, if you want to even call it that, now I'll say the word God, but again, for me, words, names, labels, symbols, myths, ideas, they're all just the finger pointing to the moon, as they say in Zen Buddhism. It's not the moon, it's just things that are pointing to that which is beyond any kind of conceptualization of the mind, any kind of word or idea. God, whatever God is, completely transcends that. And so when I had this mystical experience, the first thing I knew was that, okay, there is something more. There is something beyond this material world, and there is something beyond what my five senses and what my mind is telling me. And for a while, when I let go of the belief in God and I came out of the old belief system of my Christian fundamentalism, there was a time where I was like, I don't know. Maybe there isn't anything beyond this material world than what my five senses are telling me. Maybe this is it. Maybe it's just atoms, and that's all there is to existence. So there was a time where I really wasn't certain about that. I didn't know. But when I had this mystical experience, the first one I had, the first thing I knew was that whatever I was experiencing, it was beyond this material world. It was something, and I don't really like talking about it because as soon as I start talking about it, it seems like it's like there are no words to describe what I experienced. It was beyond the mind, and it was beyond words. It was ineffable. But I came away from that experience profoundly transformed, and I knew deep in my bones that whatever I just experienced, it was not separate from me. It was actually one with me. And part of this experience was the realization that the deepest truth of my being was beyond my body and my mind. The truth of who I am is so much more than what I've been taught and what my mind has told me. And for a moment, I glimpsed what it meant to experience the divine presence. And with that came this knowing, this realization, this unveiling. It was like the reality that I'm experiencing here in this 3D earth realm was the veil that keeps us from seeing ultimate reality behind what our five senses are telling us was removed, and there was this experiential knowing of, oh my goodness, this is what it is. This is the truth. This is what's been behind this veil of separation, the Maya that we experience here on earth, the Maya that we experience through our finite minds. And Maya is just a Sanskrit word in Hinduism, and it just means illusion. It's the illusion of separation that we are experiencing here on this earth through our five senses, through our finite mind. But for a moment, I transcended that, and I could see and experience and know, God. Again, knowing. It was a direct experience. And here's the thing about that. That experience transformed me. I've never been the same since, and I've had more experiences like that since the first one through meditation. Meditation was my method. Meditation is what enabled me to experience that, to have that encounter, to come away with a deep inner knowing. But there are many different methods, and that's the important thing to realize. So you have to find, this is what I teach now, this is what I encourage people now, okay? Now, I just shared with you my experience, and I didn't go into detail too much because, again, I don't like going into detail for different reasons, but mainly because as soon as I start talking about it, as soon as I start trying to describe it, I just feel like in my mind, as I'm trying to talk about it, as I'm trying to describe it, I just feel like I'm missing it because there's no words, there's no thoughts, there's no ideas that can begin to encompass it. It just doesn't work that way. But I know that whatever I experienced and what I've experienced multiple times since then through meditation is something that men and women have been experiencing for thousands of years, especially in the East, especially in these mystical traditions of the different religions. And so that is something that I wanted to mention, because I know some people could say, well, how can you allow your own personal subjective experience to determine what truth is for you, or what you know to be true? And my answer to that is, well, I think that is extremely important. First and foremost, I think we should all want to experience, we should all want to have a direct experience with truth, with God, with ultimate reality for ourselves, instead of just relying on other people to tell us what it is, or to experience it for us, or to tell us to believe in something, and to just live our whole lives with this belief that maybe, and you never know, and I hope, and we'll have to see. No, everyone should want to have a direct experience that leads to a knowing. But I understand what people are saying. Well, it's subjective, and how can you expect me to believe that? Well, I'm not expecting you to believe what I just said. I don't really care, to be honest. My hope is that you would want to experience it for yourself. And so that's what my heart is. My heart is to teach people and to encourage people how to not believe in God, but to experience God for themselves. Because with that experience comes knowing. And here's the thing. Jesus wanted us to know. He didn't want us to believe. He wanted us to know. He said, you will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. When you have this experience and you walk away with a knowing, not just believing, you are free. That is the path of liberation, that inner knowing. And that is something that any one of us can experience. And when we experience it, we are immensely transformed, and we transcend the ego, and we discover that our true self is fundamentally one with God. God is not just separate from us. He's not a deity. He's not even a he. Okay? It's beyond all of that. And there's this interconnectedness of life. That's another main thing I experienced. I experienced that separation is an illusion, and that everything is one. I felt one with everything. Okay? That's what happens during these experiences. And like I was saying, okay, yeah, this is my experience, but many other people have had this same experience through meditation or through different methods. There's different methods, there's different paths. But this is something that has been around, that people have been experiencing for thousands of years. And you can read about this in many of the ancient spiritual texts. So that gives me confidence, that gives me assurance, but I'm not relying on anyone else's experiences. I'm not relying on any other traditions, on any other holy books or what any teacher or preacher or guru says. Why? Because I now know for myself. I've had the experience. And I know it transcends belief. It transcends the mind. It transcends thinking. And I think personally, and I don't know if it's like this for everyone, but I think a lot of times what enables us to have that experience is just having the posture of being open and the posture of like being okay with knowing that you potentially have been wrong about everything you once believed to be true. And so that's where humility comes in, because it does take humility to accept that, to say, hey, everything that I've been believing in, everything that I've been taught, maybe it's not what I thought it was. Maybe there's something much more to it. And so if we have that approach, if we have that posture of just being open, and we're willing to experience whatever it is, whatever God is, and we go into the meditation or the spiritual practice with that mindset, then I think that that is going to help us experience ultimate reality, truth, the Tao, God. There's so many different words, but again, it ultimately transcends all words and all names. But I think about like one of the Christian mystics, Meister Eckhart. He had a quote where he basically said that like it's all about leaving God for God in that journey, in that experience. So we have to let go. We have to leave all of our notions about God, all of our beliefs about God. And once we do that, then we are preparing ourselves to experience what is. Because as long as we have these different beliefs and these different thoughts about God, these preconceived notions, that can potentially prevent us from having that direct experience of knowing. And so, yeah, I know I've said a lot today, and I know for many of you, this can be challenging, this can be new, and I think the most important thing is I hope that my message and my story would encourage you to want to know, to want to have a direct experience, a direct encounter with God, to where you can come away and say, I no longer believe in God. Those days are over. There's no need to believe because I now know. There is a knowing within my heart, and this has completely transformed my life. It has made me free. As Jesus says, you will know the truth and the truth will make you free. He didn't say you will believe in the truth. He said you will know the truth. This is a knowing that comes from direct, life-changing experience. So do I believe in God? I don't think that's the right question. That's not even a question for me anymore. I don't think about that. It's not about belief anymore. It's about knowing. Knowing is what makes you free. Knowing is what leads to liberation. And knowing is what it's a privilege that each and every one of us can have. It's something that any of us can access and experience because this knowing is an inner knowing. It's not like knowing about something that's out there somewhere that's distant from ourselves, something that's other than ourselves. It's fundamentally one with ourselves. And so in knowing ourselves, we know God. And in knowing God, we know ourselves. And that's why there's such a deep focus and importance on knowing thyself in spirituality, because as we begin to know thyself, when we know who we really are, not just believe, but know, then we know God. And Jesus even mentions this He talks about this in the Gospel of Thomas, and I will be making a video about that really soon. So I think that's it for today. If you found this video helpful, informative, or insightful, please leave a thumbs up at the bottom of the screen and be sure to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.